Hello, class, and welcome to American Literature for Friday, March the 27th. Today we're going to actually read Chapter 1 of The Moon is Down. And so hopefully you have either your copy of the novel, the hard copy that you bought at the beginning of the year, but you can also find a copy, a PDF version of Chapter 1 on the Google Classroom post that I submitted for today. Before we read, what I'd like to do is just give you a few details about these characters we're going to meet in Chapter 1 so that you have an idea of who you're actually reading about. Now, Chapter 1 begins with an invasion of a military nature. And the town that is invaded, this fictional town that John Steinbeck creates, is led by a man named Mayor Orden. He is the democratically elected leader of this town. Now, he has a wife. She's a minor character for the most part. Her name is Madam Orden, and we'll see her in Chapter 1. Mayor Orden has a second in command, and that is Dr. Winter. Now, he is an actual medical doctor, but he also helps Mayor Orden run the town. The main antagonist, the main villain, if you will, is Colonel Lancer, and he is the leader, the military leader of this invading army. Now, he is not the leader of the entire nation, but he is the leader of the military that we see in this book. Joseph is a servant in the mayor's house, as is Annie. She's the cook. And Mr. Carell, not Steve Carell, not Michael Scott from The Office. No, Mr. Carell, George Carell, is a member of the town that actually is the mole. He betrays his town by allowing the invading army in. So he actually has been helping the invading army for a while. So those are some of the characters that you're going to read about, and we'll be talking about them in more detail a little bit later. Finally, before you start reading the text, what I'd like to remind you of is one of the reasons that we're reading this book. And this book is all about democracy. Specifically, why is democracy a durable and more powerful form of government, ultimately, than other forms of government? And so these quotes from some former presidents as well as a Greek philosopher highlight the ideas of democracy that we'll see in Chapter 1. Ronald Reagan says, democracy is worth dying for because it is the most deeply honorable form of government ever devised by man. So what makes democracy honorable? John F. Kennedy said, the ignorance of one voter, so the lack of intelligence of a voter, in a democracy impairs the security of all. So if you don't know what's going on, it actually hurts people. Aristotle says, in a democracy, the poor will have more power than the rich because there are more of them. And the will of the majority, that's a great phrase to keep in mind, the will of the majority, the will of the people, as Chapter 1 is going to say, is supreme. And George W. Bush said, you can't put democracy and freedom back in a box, right? Once democracy and freedom are out and people want to have and experience that, they will. All right, now it's time to read the chapter. So like I said, you can either find the version that's on Google Classroom in PDF form, or you can get the hard copy of the book. But you're going to pause the video. You're going to stop the video for now, and you're going to read Chapter 1. You're also going to complete the reading guide using the SOAR method, right? So you're going to summarize, observe, and you're going to analyze. You're not going to do the response yet. That's for later, after Chapter 4. But you're going to read Chapter 1 and complete the reading guide. So pause the video now, and you can resume the video once you're done reading. All right, so I'll see you in about 30 minutes. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed and understood most of Chapter 1. What I'd like to do in the remaining time we have together today is just summarize and discuss 3 key points that I saw within the first chapter that I want to highlight and draw to your attention. And the 3 points are listed here on the screen. First of all, the surprise of the town to this new reality that they're in. I also want to talk about the compassion, which is a strange word to use to talk about an invading army, but the compassion of the invaders. And then finally, the differences that we see within even Chapter 1 between this democratic government led by Mayor Orden and the authoritative government represented by Colonel Lancer. So to talk about these 3 ideas, we're going to actually go to the text. So I have, just like you did, a PDF version of the story here on my iPad. And we're going to go through some of those ideas that I want to get to. First and foremost, let's discuss this strange new reality within the town and the surprise that the townspeople experienced. Steinbeck kicks this off from page 1. when he discusses the invasion itself. Right, the very bottom of page 1, the machine guns clattered. That's the machine guns of the invaders. Clattered for a moment, and 6 of the soldiers, and he uses this interesting phrase, became dead. He doesn't say they were slaughtered. He doesn't say they were brutally murdered. He says they became dead. In a lot of war books, there's much more graphic imagery used, but Steinbeck has this strange, simple phrase, became dead. We see the shock then of the town as they try to adjust to this new reality that they're not experienced with. There's actually a humorous moment of this shock on page 4, right? Dr. Winter and Joseph are waiting for the mayor. Like, hey, what's the mayor doing, right? He's dressing to receive the colonel. Aren't you helping him? Oh, Madam Orden, she's helping him. Madam wants him to look his best, right? Madam is trimming the hair out of his ears, sir. Right? So this man's town has just been invaded, and his wife is worried about his appearance so much that she's trimming the hair in his ears. I mean, if you're not laughing at that point, it's just really ridiculous to imagine. Right? This old man, right, is getting his hair trimmed out of his ears. The surprise continues. Page 9. After we meet one of the invaders, Captain Bentuk, who we'll talk about more later, the town doesn't know what they should do to be good hosts to these invaders. Right? Joseph and Madam Orden are trying to figure this out. And Madam Orden even says, should we offer them tea or a glass of wine? Right? Is that the right thing to do? Should we just invite them in and say, hey, would you like something to drink? Right? Mayor Orden, he even acknowledges this confusion. Right? The people are confused now. They lived at peace for so long, they don't quite believe in war. Right? They don't quite believe in war. Right? They've not been conquered in a long time. So, point 1, coming to grips and terms with a new reality, a new situation, kind of like you're doing right now, as you're coming to grips and coming to reality with online classes. Right? Okay, next up, let's talk about the invaders and these compassionate invaders, these invaders who are polite and respectful. Like I mentioned earlier, Captain Bentuk, very bottom of page 5, is the first invader that we know by name. And he is kind of the second in command to Colonel Lancer, right? When he comes into the mayor's home, he bows, right? Continued as though a little embarrassed, right? He has to search the home for weapons. And he's going to do that before the commanding officer arrives. But he says, we mean no disrespect, sir. I don't want you to think that we're doing anything mean. This is part of our procedure. Right? We're not doing anything wrong. We want to be polite about it. So he bows, which this is this symbol of ultimate politeness and respect. He's not the only respectful one, though. Colonel Lancer, who is in charge of this invasion, who's in charge of these soldiers, he himself is very respectful and compassionate. In fact, after he's been talking to the mayor for a few moments at the top of page 15, he looks at him compassionately when he talks about the bloodshed that occurred earlier in the day, the loss of these 6 soldiers' lives. He has compassion, right? He feels bad about it. He apologizes almost for killing these soldiers. Again, this is a strange and very different way that we might think of an invasion. All right, finally, I'd like to get to a conversation that happens starting on page 16. This is a continuation, really, of a conversation between Mayor Orden and Colonel Lancer. And it highlights the third point that I wanted to draw your attention to. We start to see from the beginning of this book the difference, the contrast between the democratic form of government and this authoritative form of government. And we see it in the way that Mayor Orden talks, right? He says, we've built our government, top of page 16, over 400 years, right? This is a long-standing democracy. And he's making sure that Colonel Lancer understands, right, that I am of this people, and I don't know what they're going to do, right? My people have elected me. I am in power because of the will of the people. I didn't take power. I didn't gain power. I was given power. I was given this authority by the people. And that's an important difference. Later on, he reminds Colonel Lancer of this when he says, yeah, you might want to do some of these things, Colonel Lancer. You might want to take over, right, the coal mine. You might want to take over my house, but the people will not like it. the people will not like it. So democracy, rule of the people, will of the people. Now, obviously, like I've said before, Colonel Lancer is set up in contrast to this. And we see that in his responses, right? So let's even choose a different color highlighter to show this. So Colonel Lancer says, you must think for them, right? I don't care what the people think. You, Mayor Orden, are in power. You've got to think for them. That's Colonel Lancer's approach. He thinks for his soldiers. And someone above him, right? If he's supposed to be a Nazi, I think we all know who is above him, is thinking on his behalf as well, right? The leader, as will be referenced in chapter 2. Later on, page 17, right? He talks about the idea of following orders, right? So in an authoritative government, my job as an individual is to follow orders. I don't think for myself. I don't worry about what other people, why they're telling me to do it. I just do it. I follow orders. And in response to the statement that Mayor Orden makes, the people will not like it, Lancer says, hey, look, the people have no say. It doesn't matter if they like it. They have no say. They're not in charge here. This conversation culminates on page 19, the last page of the chapter. And there's this beautiful little exchange between Orden and Lancer. And I want to just draw your attention to some of the comments made by each character. Let's go back to the Orden color, right? Lancer asks him, will you try to cooperate? And Orden says, I don't know. Whatever the town decides, I'll probably do that. And Lancer's like, but hold on a second. You're the authority, right? You're the one in charge. It doesn't matter what they think. That's his mindset. That's his view. And then Orden, sorry, I changed colors again. Orden says, you won't believe this, but it's true. The authority is in the town. Right? So the authority is in the people. And that is really the fundamental difference that we see between this democratic rule and this totalitarian rule. And a question I want to pose to you as you continue reading the story is, which way do we see being more humane, being more positive to the way that human beings actually live and think and work? All right, last thing for today. We're going to go back to the slides briefly because you have one more small, short task. I would love if we could all sit around in our classroom and have a discussion about this book, but unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen. So we're going to try to do a little bit of discussion, maybe even some debate if you engage this way, on Google Classroom. So what you're going to do is you're going to find the question underneath the discussion question, Moon is Down, Chapter 1. It should be linked on Classroom. And you're going to write a 3 to 5 sentence response, minimum of 3 to 5 sentences. Could be a little longer if you want to. I also want you to read your classmates' answers. Right? So if the other people have posted already when you're on, that's great. You can see what they've said to some of these questions and respond. And this is going to be a daily routine, and it's going to be worth 2 points every day. So for each of the 8 chapters, we'll be doing this. The questions for today are this. The soldiers in this novel often claim that they are just following orders. And so I want you to think about, can acts of war, following orders, things like killing, destruction, death, be justified if the soldiers are simply following orders from a commanding officer? So take a position on that and maybe offer some support. Maybe you'd rather answer question 2. Can invaders be compassionate and kind in the process of invading? Or is true compassion impossible when in a situation of war, or invasion? So again, take a stand, take a perspective on that issue, and offer some thoughts. Thank you all for listening to the video. Hopefully you enjoyed Chapter 1. We'll be back on Monday to talk about Chapter 2. Have a great rest of your day and a wonderful weekend.